Welcome to the first video in the Introduction to SAT Reading program. In this video, we're going to talk about simplification, which is mostly about understanding the types of questions you'll face in the SAT. Why is understanding questions in the SAT important? Well, the SAT is a standardized test, and this means that questions aren't randomly created, but follow a relatively predictable pattern. If you can unlock these patterns, it will make solving the questions a lot simpler and quicker. So what does it mean to simplify a question? Basically put, a simplified question leaves only the most important pieces of information needed for solving a question. Now, more than 90% of questions in the SAT can be simplified by using just 3 words: what, why, or how. Let's see how it's done using real SAT questions. Here are a few real SAT questions and their simplified alternatives. First of all, the original. Wolf uses the word we throughout the passage mainly to becomes. Why is we used throughout the passage? The next one, the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect becomes. What is a potential positive effect of space mining? And then the third one, which is really long, the author of passage 2 would most likely respond to the discussion of the future of space mining in lines 18 to 21, passage 1, by claiming that such a future, wow, that was long, becomes instead what is said in lines 18 to 21, and then what would the author of passage 2 think about that? So what I hope you're noticing is how the simplified alternatives cut through all of the clutter in the original question and make it a lot simpler to focus on exactly what information the question wants you to find. Additionally, take a look at the third question, the really long one. Can you see how I actually split the original question into 2 separate questions? This was deliberate on my part, because this allows me to grapple with the question in a way that is simpler. Instead of being overwhelmed by a long-winded question, I now know what I need to figure out: 2 different but interrelated questions. So don't be afraid to make multiple small questions if it'll improve your understanding of the original question. Now, it may seem that simplification takes a lot of work and may be unnecessary. Nothing can be further from the truth. It is well worth the investment of time and mental energy. By simplifying successfully, you will give yourself a crystal clear roadmap to work off. You will know exactly what destination you need to head toward with no distractions. Let's now have a look at questions from passage 1 of College Board Release Test number 1. You'll be able to find this test in the sidebar of the course page. Please pause the video now and download the test if you have not done so already. Here is passage 1 of College Board Release Test number 1. So you'll also notice one striking thing here. There are no answer choices. Don't worry, this is totally deliberate and done by me. The reason is I want you to focus purely on the questions with no other distractions. Let's now read through each of the questions and I'll tell you how I would simplify them. So question number 1, which choice best describes what happens in the passage becomes what happens in the passage. Question 2, which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage becomes how does the passage develop. Question 3, as used in line 1 and line 65, directly most nearly means. What does directly mean? Question 4, which reaction does Akira most fear from chair? This one is pretty simplified already, but if I had to simplify it would be, what reaction does Akira fear from chair? 5 is an evidence question for 4, so you can skip that. 6 In the passage, Akira addresses Chia with becomes, how does Akira address Chi? 7, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to, what is the purpose of the first paragraph? 8, as used in line 2, for most nearly means, what does for mean? 9, why does Akira say his meeting with Chia is a matter of urgency? Why is Akira's meeting with Chia urgent? And then 10 is just an evidence question. Did you see how quickly I managed to do that? Obviously I've had a lot of practice, but I want you to be just as quick. Being able to simplify quickly and effectively is a fundamental SAT skill that you must master if you hope to get that high score. Let's have a look at all those simplifications together. Here they are. Now you can also see here that I've included the simplifications for the next passage. At this point, why don't you pause the video and try and simplify these questions yourself? I'll wait here. Welcome back. So how did you do? Take a look at my simplifications and compare your version to mine. Check whether you have been as clean and clinical as I have. You don't need to have the exact same wording as I have, but try and see if your simplified questions will lead to the same destination, if I can put it that way. Something I'd particularly like to highlight in my simplified questions is that I always remove words that imply there may be any ambiguity on the part of the answer. These ambiguity-driven words and phrases include best, most likely, seems to be saying, implies, suggests, etc. Whenever you see these words or phrases in a question, shoot them on sight. Do not let them into your simplified questions. The reason for this is that these words send a subconscious signal to you that there is some kind of ambiguity within the answer choices. If I can put it another way, imagine if I asked you what kind of food out of 4 choices you like best. The way I've phrased my question suggests a sort of hierarchy of preference on your part. So you may think, well, I like pizza best, but spaghetti is also pretty good. And then lasagna is so-so, etc. This way of thinking is terrible for the SAT. You need to understand in your heart that there is no best answer. There is only the right answer. 3 answers that are 100% fundamentally incorrect and 1 answer that is 100% fundamentally correct. The end. Many times students I teach say to me, Mr. Kirby, the question seems to be saying that there are 2 answers that are close to being correct. Yes, that is what the question says, but it's a lie. There is no best. There is only the right answer choice and 3 wrong answer choices. So you need to train yourself to have this absolutist mindset that will force you to only consider the reality of a single, perfectly correct answer. Simplification then subconsciously does this for you. So, to sum up, always simplify questions on the SAT. Most questions can be simplified by using what, why, or how. Simplification is beneficial because it makes you more focused, better equipped to understand what information you need to find in the passage, and less prone to believe there is any ambiguity in the question. So how should you move forward from here? Well, before moving on to the next video, I suggest you practice simplifying with the 3 tests I've attached to the sidebar. In all 3 tests, I've removed the answer choices. This gives you a nice bit of space to write your simplified questions underneath. Print each of the tests and then write down your simplified questions in the space provided. Don't worry about doing the evidence questions. Like, for example, here question 5 and 10 in the first passage because these are always the same in terms of what the question is asking. It's always asking just for the evidence for the prior question. As you work through the test, try and increase the speed at which you simplify. If you're very good, simplifying each question in your head should take no longer than 5 seconds after reading the original question. Then you'll really be on your way to SAT stardom. So after you finish practicing simplifying with those 3 tests, you should be totally ready to move on to the next step in the SAT solving process. So I'll see you in the next video.